Okay, so I'm going to address a couple of things. One, I've seen several people upload videos on the Patriot survivalist type stuff, Civil War in America coming along, and a lot of professional protesters hitting the streets because they're being paid to hit the streets. Okay, I've been finding I didn't post it in video because I was still kind of in the middle of the investigative phase on what I was trying to put together. There was a few things I've been running across that I'm probably never going to put in video. I would discuss privately with a few people, and that is the involvement of the occult in a few things. That it's little signs of that, little signals of that. Some of which have been really blatant, and some of which predate. There was a situation from 2015, and I don't fully understand it, but apparently something got out of hand, or somebody was doing some kind of ritual ceremony type thing, and it got really out of hand. There was another one I was investigating in Oakland a few months ago, and it's now looking like it was a similar situation, but probably they stumbled into it. There was much less of a supernatural component on that one, and probably more irresponsibility and criminal action. That's what some of the other people are telling me. And the situation with the politics that I've seen on some of the protester stuff, these people will change flags according to whenever they want. Lately, there was some kind of a conflict between the Black Lives Matter groups and some of the other groups, and some of them started waving anarchist flags. The Black Lives Matter stuff is still being used someplace because they don't want to go buy new signs. Okay, that's basically what's going on with that. As far as this turning into a civil war, the question is who's going to pay for it. Soldiers learn the score very quickly. Okay, people who are into shit. There's a reason why soldiers, troops in combat are 25 years old and look 45. Okay, they look a lot older than they actually are, and they tend to have that type of much more life experience in a closer time frame than somebody who's not. And we have to realize that these people on the streets that are doing stuff, that are getting involved in actions, that are doing a lot of the stuff in the world they live in, they're soldiers for their cause. Okay, so just because they haven't gone out and gotten guns yet or brought their guns out doesn't mean that's not there. It doesn't mean it's not a component of it. You can laugh and scoff at a lot of these fat teenage kids with a little black beret thing doing the but you got to realize they're out actually doing something which is going to have a social, economic, and political impact. That's not at a gaming console. Okay, they're still out on the street. They're still doing something. Is it going to be impressive to somebody? Probably not impressive, but it demonstrates a willingness to try. Demonstrates a willingness to see a lot of this through. And if you look at really old video footage from 1968, you look at old footage of a lot of the early SDS people, the early Weatherman people, and then you compare it to the newer generation, you got to realize that there was a rationing of cameras back then. Okay, that the cameramen quite often were undercover FBI agents, so they were looking for who the up-and-coming leaders were. They were looking for they weren't looking to scoff at these people. They weren't looking to humiliate or make them look stupid. They were demonstrating, okay, here's the threat, here's the real leaders, here's the people we've identified. We're going to take pictures of them in action so that you can see what we see. And so a lot of times the cameras are the cameramen were the undercover cops, and the what do they call this? The anti-subversive squads in local police departments. And so that, in turn, directed certain levels of COINTELPRO actions and stuff like that. And the ones that survived were usually either really smart, really savvy, or they they did things. They started to figure out who the cameramen were, who was getting targeted, who wasn't, that sort of thing. So if we compare the new generation to the 60s generation, you have to realize that there was a shortage of cameras back then. There was going to be a shortage of video because film versus still pictures it just wasn't as common. So these people are engaged. Okay, so the smart ones are going to sort out from the not so smart ones. The hardcore ones are going to sort out from the not so hardcore ones, and doesn't take a big bad hardcore people to operate crew served weapons. To some degree it can be, but these it doesn't necessarily mean that your low level private's going to be a grunt. Okay, it can be a crew serve type person. So when you're looking at these people having their little dare campaigns, their little ways of establishing bona fides with each other, that's all legitimate. But the bottom line is, Army's got to get paid. They got to be promised something. What is attracting them to this stuff? Okay, what's attracting them to this stuff is a lot of times their parents' generation are telling them, hey, we did everything right and it worked out wrong. These aren't the children of the Vietnam generation, these are the grandchildren of the Vietnam generation, okay? And so with a lot of these people that grew up in the 80s, they had kids, their kids right now are looking at a lot of stuff. They're looking at neighborhoods that they grew up in, they can't afford to stay in, okay? They can't afford to stay there. They're looking at jobs which don't pay the cost of living, okay? There's a seniority tax in a lot of the areas where these people live, and one of the things people talk about is how, hey, they all live at home. That's because they cannot survive otherwise. And you would say, well, how come they don't just get a job? Ha, ha, ha. Well, go on to Craigslist in these areas where a lot of these protesters are getting recruited, a lot of this stuff is going on. Go into the Craigslist and just compare the rental and the sale properties versus the available jobs and what they pay and what qualifications they're asking for. If you look at that, you'll find that it's not sustainable. Okay, they have come to a conclusion looking at this stuff that what their reality is that they've been faced with is not sustainable. They need places to live, they need jobs, they need to eat, they need all these things. They look at the reality that's in front of them, and that's not available to them, and it's not sustainable. So there's two things that are getting really popular among the millennials, especially the late millennials, not the early millennials, the late millennials. Two things getting real popular. One is off-grid living and settlement type stuff, because it's what's affordable to the 16 to 21 year olds. What's affordable to them? Okay, what is really available to the 16 to 21 year olds? Off-grid type stuff. And what happens? Is this available to them? Is there a seniority tax that they have to pay because somebody else came along before they did? Or are they looking at socialism because they want certain guarantees? Their parents want certain guarantees for them because their parents quite often are too poor to leave a whole lot to them, and probably think that they shouldn't have to leave a whole lot to them. They think that if you play by the rules of society, society should take care of this because there's a social contract involved. So when you're looking at the conservative movement on this, okay, what are these values providing? Where does this go? If you make $70,000, $80,000 a year, you can live quite well in any of those areas. You can do quite well. You start making what, again, the jobs on Craigslist offer, then the question is, how sustainable is that? Can you have kids between the age of 25 and 30? Could you afford to raise those kids between the age of 25 and 30? Could you buy a home before you're 30 years old so that that home is paid off by the time you're 60 years old? Could you build a home yourself and live in it and not have a mortgage? And that way, if you have periods of unemployment or periods of hardship, well, at least you're not going to be homeless. You'll have a place. You'll have a place in your community. You'll deal with the same neighbors and the same people in the same church. And you'll have a place in the community if for some reason you're down and you're out of work and you no, Okay, that's not the case. With a lot of these people, if they lose 2, 3 weeks income, they're instantly homeless. They're living in their car. They're couch surfing, and everybody among them knows somebody this has probably happened to. So they're going to look at other types of social contracts, and they're going to go through the books. They're going to talk to the teachers. They're going to hear stuff from the counselors, and some things that are going to look attractive in that is homesteading, especially any kind of group homesteading, socialism, and communism. Something that offers them some level of stability and guarantee, because that wealth transfer already took place if they're white. If they're black, they're mainly looking at violence issues and crime issues, and if those are solved for them, they're probably not really going to care about the rest of it. If they're not solved for them, they're going to look at different options on that. That's why, for example, in a lot of these states, the question of whether or not these groups are able to recruit new help or have the support of, let's say, older, more established organizations such as the NAACP, that remains an open question of who's going to pay for the revolution and where does it end. If the majority of people that own things, that have access to wealth, are not willing to pay for either side of that revolution, nobody's really going to want to fight that. It's not a sustainable war. If it's not a sustainable war, then the war isn't going to last very long, and it's not going to be very active. On the other hand, if people think that they're going to go to war against the younger generation because the younger generation doesn't want to pay a seniority tax in the form of lower paying jobs, higher rents, higher taxes, pre-existing debt where every baby born owes a certain amount of money and taxes. Well, is this a two-way street? Is this for building a better society? Is this for more public resources and places available? You could sell people on the concept of if you pay a bunch of taxes, here's all these benefits that are going to be there for you. If somebody says, well, here's all these taxes, and if you're good enough, you'll have a well-paid upper middle class government job, but if you're not good enough, no, you're just going to pay and fuck you. Then they got a problem with that. And the question is, which economic and social and political philosophy is going to be most attractive under those circumstances?